So let's open with a chant, and those who know can join me. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we acquire strength together. May our learning shine forth in our lives. May we not find fault with one another. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening. This is tonight we are beginning the third class in Karma Yoga for beginners, delivered by Swami Vivekananda on January 3rd, 1896. That is in New York City at 228 West 39th Street in Manhattan. And it was January 3rd, it was winter, probably quite cold. And we know that there were two rooms, sort of connected rooms with probably a sliding door between them that was opened. And so there were these two rooms, would have been full of people. Somewhere between 70 and 120 people would have been in the room as Swamiji is giving this class. So this is he gave a series of classes for advanced students and beginner students at the same time. So the evenings were the beginnings classes and the mornings were the advanced classes. And most likely, most of the people there were attending both series. But we are following the classes in the order of first the 4 classes for beginners, and then we'll continue with the 4 classes for the advanced students afterwards when we're ready for that. So let us remind ourselves, the first class was, do you remember? Karma in its effect on character. How what we do leaves a result. And there are different kinds of results, but the result that was specifically mentioned or emphasized in that class was how our character is changed by the way we work. And then the second class was myself have forgotten. What is duty? All discussion, in-depth discussion on duty. And for the beginning student, for the beginning practitioner of Karma Yoga, that we do our duty without complaint, without longing for any results. We just do our duty as our duty, and this leads to perfection. And he gave the example of remember the Vyadha Gita, the butcher who attained perfection simply through doing that rather unpleasant duty of butchering animals, or at least chopping them up and selling the meat for food. And then tonight we have the third class. We help ourselves, not the world. So I think we can understand where it's going, that ultimately the idea that we can help others, it's not a helpful idea. It's how can we actually help others? Can we help the world? Can we actually do anything for the world? We try. And yet what actually ends up happening is we help ourselves. This is the idea which Swamiji will take up in this class, though I don't think we're going to get there tonight because he has a lot of wonderful ideas that he presents. And he begins with the 3 parts of religion. Philosophy, mythology, and ritual. So let us remind ourselves also that the idea of Karma Yoga is not how to work to be the most efficient worker, not how to work to get the most money or how to work to be so efficient that we can work less and less and have more time for meditation or something like that. No, the idea of karma yoga is the same as the goal of karma yoga is the same as all the yogas, all spiritual practice, to realize our true nature. And karma yoga may be the most difficult of all the yogas because we forget so easily. When I do something, I want the result. I'm doing it because I want a result. When I cook because I'm hungry and I want to eat. And yet karma yoga tells us, you have no right to the results of your work. You only have the right to the work. So it's a very difficult yoga, as all yoga is. And yet Swami Vivekananda wanted that we develop all these sides to our spiritual practice. Yes, we'll have to work. Then we have to know how to work. And that is to pay attention to the means of work, pay attention to how we work, and not think about the results of work. Let the results come or not come. That's not up to us. In each religion, there are three parts, he begins the class. First, the philosophy, then the mythology, and then the ritual. It's a very nice analysis. We find this in all religions. He'll go on to explain. The philosophy, of course, is the essence of all religions. And the mythology has to express that philosophy through lives of great men and women, interspersed with stories of wonderful things and so forth. And then there is the ritual, which brings it to a still more concrete form so that everyone can grasp it. Concretized philosophy is ritual. Wonderful. Philosophy, most people are not going to be deep philosophers. The teachings of the Upanishads, to think in abstract philosophical terms, the self in me is the self in all beings, it may not appeal to most people. But mythology, people love a good story. We're here in Hollywood. Hollywood is the great center of modern Western mythology, you can say, because the movies they're created here, and they express and create new myths and build on the certain myths that we have as a culture. So we love good stories, and so many of the scriptures are like that, good stories. What do those stories do? They express the truths they express truth through stories, and they make it accessible to all of us. Now, of course, every religion will say, no, the other religions, that's mythology. Our religion, it's history. What's written in our scriptures is fact. It's history. It's not mythology. But in other religions, those are myths. Actually, surely there's a mix of history and mythology. We know in the Mahabharata, it describes a tremendous war. And there seems to be some evidence, historical evidence for this war, that there was a war fought. But we know some of the occurrences in this war. To me, they look like mythology. They express wonderful magical things, the magical weapons. Well, we won't say it's impossible, but it doesn't matter. In Vedanta, the Hindu tradition, there isn't this reliance on historical fact, that the scriptures must express a historical fact. And if it's not historically true, then they're worthless. Because they're expressing these ideas, and it's the principles which are the important part. And the principles are expressed by these events described in the scriptures, whether or not they are factually or historically true in the Western sense that it happened on a certain date and a certain time, and there were witnesses, and they wrote it down exactly as they saw it happen. So that's not necessary from the standpoint of mythology helping us to progress in spiritual life. Say, as he puts it, the mythology has to express the philosophy through the lives of the great men and women who are described in the mythologies. And then ritual. Ritual makes the philosophy, puts it into concrete forms, that we do something that we actually do. And that's why this comes into karma yoga, because ritual is action. And it reminds me that in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna often says the karma yoga is not the path for this age, bhakti yoga is the path for this age. Now Swami Vivekananda is saying karma yoga, we have to work, we have to serve humanity. How do we reconcile these? Well, one reason is that when Sri Ramakrishna speaks of karma yoga, the path of karma, he doesn't use the term karma yoga, but the path of karma, he's talking about the path of rituals and the extensive rituals prescribed for the religious person who has rituals from morning to night, and very long and complicated rituals, especially for the Brahmin tradition of Sandhya Vandana, and so much time and effort to collect all the ingredients for rituals and all that. It's a very involved and slow process. So that kind of karma, Sri Ramakrishna didn't encourage too much. But Swami Vivekananda, of course, is teaching karma yoga through action, not just rituals. But here he's going to talk about rituals. Let's see what he says. Concretized philosophy is ritual. That's a beautiful idea. Do we need to say anything more about that? How can we understand it? Well, let's take an example of our ritual. We do here a daily ritual in the evening. Many of you have attended the Arati, and we wave lights before the altar, and then we offer water, and then we offer space, symbolized by a little cloth, and then we offer a flower, and then we offer a fan. We wave the deities on the altar. So it seems like a very physical, like God is sitting there and we're offering some things and trying to please him. But how is it then concretized philosophy? Well, it goes back to the philosophy of what is this, how is this manifest universe, of what is it composed? And one way of understanding how it is composed is to think of it as in terms of how we can perceive it. In what ways do we perceive it? And though we perceive it with our eyes, our ears, our sense of smell, taste, and touch, and these 5 methods of understanding this world are connected with the 5 elements. Which elements are? Sense of smell is connected with the element earth, sense of sight with the element fire, sense of taste with the element water, sense of hearing with the element of space, and the sense of touch with the element of air or wind. So then we understand that at the end of the day, when we're performing the Aratrika, we are actually offering all the elements of this manifest universe back to the divine. As in the morning the sun rises and the world awakes, and in the evening the sun sets, and everything goes back into the divine from whence it came. That is how our evening worship is actually concretized philosophy. So does that give a little sense of what he's talking about here, concretized philosophy? We could talk about the noon worship also, how that involves the philosophy. But let's read a little more in Karma Yoga. This ritual is karma and is necessary in every religion, because most of us cannot understand abstract spiritual thoughts until we grow very much spiritually. Okay, for us beginners, ritual is helpful. It is very easy for people to think that they can understand anything. But when it comes to actual experience, we find we are mistaken, and that we have no conception whatever of abstract ideas. So in that state of mind, we find a great deal of help from these symbols, the symbolical method of putting things before us. So by symbols, he's kind of made a jump here, but I think we understood the symbols. We had in our example of the evening prayer, we have the fire and the water and the space. These are all symbolized by things which we're, physical objects which we're waving before the altar. So these symbols in the beginning of spiritual life these things are very helpful. And I will say from my own experience, when I first started getting interested in meditation, I set up a little altar in my room, and I used to go out in front of the building where I lived. There was a jade plant, and that time of year when the jade plant produces flowers, one beautiful flowers, full of flowers, so I would pluck a few of those little bunches of flowers and lay them before the altar and bow down, bow my head. An expression of devotion, the philosophy of love, to love the divine, but made concrete through symbols. Some symbols on the altar, some symbols of the divine, and I am symbolically offering myself by laying a flower there. And I was amazed. I was not expecting this. Doing this for some time, one day I came into my room and bowed before that little altar, and I felt something. I felt that there's some kind of presence here, that it's not just a little shelf with some pictures on it. There's a holy presence here. This is how ritual, how karma in the form of ritual can help us to progress spiritually. Because ultimately the goal, remember, is experience, direct experience of the divine. So in that state of mind, that beginner state of mind, we find a great deal of help from these symbols, the symbolical method of putting things before us. From time immemorial, these symbols have been used by all varieties of religions. In one sense, we cannot but think in symbols. Words themselves are symbols for the thought. In another sense, everything in the universe is a symbol. So Swamiji would not plan out a class ahead of time and say, well, I'm going to deal with these particular things. He would just speak. So now he's going into a very in-depth subject and one of a very deep philosophy of language and how words mean what they mean and all of that. And I don't think we're going to go into it too deeply tonight, but he's touching on this as part of Karma Yoga. In one sense, everything in the universe is a symbol. A chair is a symbol of the real chair behind, which we do not know. The thing we see is the symbol of the thing signified. And now here he gives the beautiful idea. The whole universe is a symbol of what? He says, God is the essence behind. The whole universe is a symbol, and God is the essence behind. So can we look on the whole universe as a symbol of the divine? Then he says, this symbology again is not created by human beings. It is not that certain people in every religion sit down and think out certain symbols, hands and feet and so forth, out of their own mind. These symbols are growth. He means they evolve. It's an evolution. You have a question, Krishna?
Yeah, so the chair example I didn't get. I see this chair and I know this is a chair. So how is it unknown?
Right. He's suggesting that behind that this physical universe is a very pale reflection of a reality behind it, a higher reality, a more a less changeful reality behind. At least that's what I understand that he's saying here. True. Would that Swamiji were here, that we could ask him exactly what did he mean by that. We don't know that reality behind, the real chair behind. But then immediately following, he says this whole universe is a symbol, and God is the essence behind. This idea that people, sometimes, particularly in Hinduism, there are so many deities, all symbols of the divine, you can say, and yet the devotees of those different forms of the divine, different manifestations of the absolute, will not say, "Oh, it's just a symbol." They'll say, "No, it's a real. The God is real. My Shiva is real, or my Kali is real, or my Rama is real, or my Krishna is real." And the forms that they take as Shiva in meditation. Did someone make it up? Did someone think, well, let's think of a God in meditation with the locks of hair and the Ganga falling on his head and all of that? Did someone just think it up? Here is Swamiji saying, no, these symbols evolve naturally. They evolve out of the experience of the saints and sages. Now he's going to point out that there are certain universal symbols, not restricted to any particular religion. Why is it that certain symbols are associated with certain ideas, with almost everyone? You will find certain symbols universal. Many of you think that the cross began with the Christian religion, but it existed before Christianity was, before Moses was born, before the Vedas, before there was any record. You will find the cross among the Aztecs, the Phoenicians. Everyone had the cross. This is, archaeologists will verify that certain symbols are found in countless ancient and even prehistoric cultures that may have meant different things in different cultures. Again, the symbol of the crucified Savior, a crucified man upon a cross, was almost in every nation. Now this, I didn't have a time to research this much. I did find that this symbol was used in pre-Christian times. In certain culture, it would have been placed in a field to protect the crops. A crucified figure of a crucified body on a cross. So it certainly was present, but I don't know about how widespread that was. A circle is the great symbol throughout the world. Then there's the most universal of all symbols, swastika. At one time it was thought that the Buddhists carried it all over the world with them, but it has been found out that ages before Buddhism it was used among nations. In old Babylon, in Egypt, it was found. What does this show? That all these symbols could not have been simply conventional. Okay, so Swamiji is arguing that because these symbols are found across cultures, it's not just a kind of convention, there's something deeper behind it. And the swastika, which of course, I was just looking it up, even in this country, up until the 1930s, it was a widely used symbol, and it was considered a good luck symbol, which is something akin to our the Hindu and Buddhist and Jain use of it as an auspicious mark, an auspicious sign. And even the meaning of the word swastika means that which is auspicious or brings blessings or that kind of thing. And of course, then in the 1930s, the Nazis co-opted it, took it over, and spoiled it for the rest of the world. So now it's sort of indelibly associated with that nasty tradition.
So I think that there is a difference between Haken Cruz and swastika. So what Nazis used is Haken Cruz.
But they called it a swastika. They also called it a swastika.
They didn't use the word swastika.
Really?
British guy used the word swastika with Hitler, but Hitler never used it.
I see, okay.
So he never used it, but afterwards they thought, oh, a Christian cross associated with Nazis is bad. So
I see. Well, okay, so then we can do some, we should talk about that, find the research. But anyhow, it looks like a swastika. There's no doubt that most people, they see the Nazi symbol and they see the symbol in the Buddhist temple and they say, but that's the same symbol. And it has been widely used for millennia, many thousands of years. So what does this show? That all these symbols could not have been simply conventional. There must be some reason, some natural association between them and the human mind. It is just as no language can be created. Simply so many people sitting down and saying, we will represent this idea by this word and that by that word. It would be impossible, because there never was an idea without a word. Ideas and words are inseparable. It's an interesting idea. Oh, we can't think of, at least the idea is, we can't make a language if we don't have language. Once we have language, there was a language created, Esperanto. Have you heard of it? And actually is a created language. A Polish, was he a doctor? A Polish gentleman created a language using elements from numerous European languages and borrowing words from different languages and putting them all together in one language. And his idea was, if everybody from different countries, if they want to learn just one extra language, they can learn this one extra language, then they can all communicate. And it's actually a very nice idea. It didn't catch on. I read that there's probably about 100,000 Esperanto speakers today in the world, and even some native speakers, a few native speakers who speak. And the grammar is extremely regular. It's a very easy language to learn because there are no anomalies of grammar or spelling, all those things. He ironed out all those things. And if you hear it, it sounds like something similar to, well, the French people think it sounds like Italian, and the Italians think it sounds like Portuguese, and the Portuguese think it sounds like Spanish. It sounds kind of like your language, but not quite, and you can recognize some words. It's interesting. So he took existing language and just reorganized it a little bit. This idea of creating a language. You need language in order to create a language. There never was an idea without a word. Ideas and words are inseparable. There never was a time when they were not inseparable. It's really interesting to think from where does language come, and how did language evolve? And this idea that it manifested out of the spota, you can say the unstruck sound, the vibration, which was the first manifestation of the absolute in duality. And out of that came the universal sound of Om, and from that came the different sounds of the alphabet, and from that came the words, and from the words came this universe. That first it came from vibration, and then it manifested in the physical universe. So anyhow, there never was an idea without a word. Ideas and words are inseparable. And Swamiji deals with this in other places too. If we think, very often they use the example of the word cow. And if you think of the word cow, if I say the word cow, what happens in your minds? An image of a cow comes, right? It happens automatically. We can't even stop it. And if we see a cow, what happens? The word cow, or if we're French, the word vache will come, or if we're whatever language we speak, that word will automatically come. So that connection is.
Maybe what he was saying about the symbol of the chair and the actual chair, if there's a cow there, if your mind doesn't go to the word, it just perceives that thing, it just perceives it. Maybe that's the true cow. And the symbol is like with the word. Maybe that's what he was before thought.
Mm-hmm. Before thought, yeah. However, he was suggesting that the chair itself is a kind of symbol. And now we've moved to a next level where the chair is the word is the symbol, and the word chair is the symbol for the object chair. But the chair itself is a symbol of something behind it. So right, before language. That's a nice point. Could be that we can think of that as before language. So here we go. There never was a time when they were not inseparable, ideas and words. These words may come in several ways. They may be sound symbols, or color symbols. Color, maybe he means form, because rupa can mean color or form. Dumb people must think with other than sound symbols. Dumb means unable to speak. Wherever there is any thought in the mind, it must have as its counterpart some form that in Sanskrit philosophy is called nama rupa, the name and form. That's true. Someone who's deaf from birth but learns to read and think, those sounds that we have in our minds when we think, they will not be there. It would be interesting to see how someone thinks who has never heard a word spoken but has learned to read and write and think. So this nama rupa, that's this manifested world is, sometimes we talk about time, space, and causation, and other times we talk about nama rupa, its name and form. And as such, it's extremely variegated, and so much variation here. And yet we are always called to go beyond nama rupa, beyond the names and the forms, to the essence. Just as it would be impossible to create a language that is the natural evolution, the expression of the human mind, so it would be impossible to create a symbology. These symbols are the expression of the religious thought of humanity. Okay, he's obviously, I think it's clear, isn't it? He's talking about symbols are as the expression of religious thought of humanity, the spiritual thought. In all religions, we have different symbols. Of course, they're different in different religions, and yet there are certain universal symbols. And the purpose is, the religious symbols, of course, are leading our beginners' minds forward higher and higher to the reality, to the divine. Wherever a person wants to express the religious feelings in him or herself, the method is to express them in certain peculiar forms. And just as thought calls out the form, so the form naturally calls in the thought. So we have this connection between the name and the form, or the thought and the form. Just as internal thought is projected outside the form, so the external form must help to bring the thought in. And that is why we see the necessity of so many temples and churches and altars and all these things. In other words, the ritual side of a religion. Okay, it's a little bit, he's taking quite a detour through how the names and forms are connected, but here he's basically coming to the point of the necessity of rituals, the necessity of churches and altars and symbols. And why? Because just as we are, as he puts it, a thought brings to mind the form, also the form brings to mind the thought. So the form of a cross, or the form of a Shiva Lingam, or the form of Krishna playing the flute, calls to mind the divine.
Swami, I forgot the title of the talk.
We help ourselves, not the world. Is what we'll see it. We'll get there. But Swamiji is not going to present just one idea in a class. That's and probably the title of the class, I expect, is not given by Swami Vivekananda. It's given by the editors of the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, or the editors of Karma Yoga, when they put together the book. Swamiji, he gave these classes extempore, without notes, without any planning, and afterwards he said, and we're reading more or less the unedited Swamiji here, because we've taken British edition, the very first British edition of Karma Yoga, which Mr. Sturdy put together from the transcripts sent to him, the verbatim transcripts, or as close to verbatim as we can get, transcripts of Swamiji's classes were sent to Sturdy for his study. And without permission, he printed them and caused a ruckus and a big argument because the New York Center felt that we have the copyright and we're going to be the first to publish it and all of that. And so we're eternally grateful to Sturdy for doing that ruckus because we can get a sense of it. However, it should also be said that Swamiji himself pointed out that these talks were given extempore without any planning and they should be edited. So he wanted them to be edited. So probably the best way to study this would be side by side, the unedited versus the edited, because those who have edited it knew Swamiji and knew his thought and knew his way of thinking, so they would have edited it well. But we get a certain freshness of the language here. That's why I've chosen to take the class with using this text. It is easy to say, what is the use of these temples and paraphernalia? Every baby says that in modern times. But every baby, when he enters, finds one set of people. And when he comes outside, finds another set of people. In other words, when you enter the church, you find people who seem to have some spiritual affinity, and outside the people are no spirituality. I visited Europe a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago. I was invited to Germany to conduct a retreat at our German center, and after that I visited our center in the Netherlands and our center in France. But what struck me about the Netherlands, we visited some old churches. I was interested in visiting some old churches, so we did. And it's a beautiful church. I have to say, the architecture is beautiful, and the way the light came in through the windows was stunning. It was beautiful. But it was the Netherlands was one of the real center parts of the Protestant Reformation, the very strongly iconoclastic movement. And so all those churches, they were old Christian churches and full of beautiful statues, I'm sure, and an altar where Jesus was worshipped, and an ornate gold altar probably. And in the Protestant Reformation, all of that had been removed. So all you had was and the windows also were removed, those stained glass windows, so there's just glass windows, clear glass windows, kind of like these windows. And the light flowing through was beautiful, but there was no statuary, nothing. It was just a beautiful architecture. And it remained that. There was no spiritual atmosphere in the church. It was kind of shocking that I thought this ancient church, we would get some spiritual mood there. Nothing. It was very dry. And there were a lot of people buried in the church, and stones, and you're walking on the stones which are paving the floor, and there's names on it. You're walking over people's bodies buried under there. And so this is Swamiji's referring to this. When you take away all these symbols, yes, the great illumined souls, they don't need any symbols. They don't need any rituals. But for most of us, we need them. Even you can say, well, Judaism is iconic. They don't allow any statues or any image of God. You can't even speak the name of God. He is Hashem, the unnamed, the unnameable. But go to a worship service. With what veneration they hold the book, the holy book, the Torah. They practically, we would say that they worship the Torah, not in the sense of putting flowers on it the way we do, but the way this book takes the place of the symbol of the divine. And Muslims also are very strict about no imagery. You can't have an image of the Prophet Muhammad, let alone of God. And yet, the Kaaba is a kind of symbol for the divine, because wherever a Muslim will pray, anywhere in the world, she or he will face the Kaaba. And they have now, of course, they have an app. You can get an app on your phone to find out which direction is the Kaaba. Wherever you are in the world, it will point towards Mecca. And so you bow down, feeling like all the Muslims all over the world, they're all pointing towards this one point. So it becomes a symbol for God. So that shows, he goes on, that shows when we find that the symbols have been completely removed, or people who are not involved with the religious symbols, people who are not in the place with all the altars and all that, we will find a different type of person. So that shows that the association of these forms has a tendency to bring into the mind the thought for which they stand as symbols. As such, the study of symbology cannot be neglected. Therefore, one part of Karma Yoga is this study. So that's how we've come this far without seemingly discussing Karma Yoga. Association with certain symbols, with certain forms, has the effect of bringing into the mind certain thoughts, and those thoughts for which the forms are symbols, and therefore the study of symbology cannot be neglected. All right, so now comes a little break in the idea. There are many other divisions of work. One is to know the relation between thought and word, and what can be done by the power of word. Okay, true. Well, part of action is speech. Speech is also certainly action. Even thought is karma. To think a thought is a kind of action which has its result. So Swamiji is reminding us that that's another reason why we don't want to forget this study of symbology, because it's part of the science of Karma Yoga. You find that in every religion, the power of word is recognized. So much so that it is said, out of word came the creation. The external part of the thought of God was word, and thus creation came out of that word. We have the same idea in Rig Veda, and I can't quote the verse, but very similar to the verse in the very beginning of the Gospel of John in the Christian Bible. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That idea that the creation, this manifested universe, starts with the word, with the primal vibration of the divine. Spota, yeah. In our hurry of life, and most of us being very materialistic, each one of our nerves becomes like an iron rope. They lose their sensibilities and become hardened. And the older we grow, being knocked about by the world, we become a mass of resisting iron and neglect things that are happening around us. The subtle, spirituality is subtle. We want to become subtle. So we have to make our nerves subtle, Swamiji is suggesting here. And if we are, most people, if we're always rushing around in the hurry of life, and sense is always directed outwards, that sensitivity of sensing subtle things leaves us. So this is the why we find, and it's not emphasized in Karma Yoga so much, but in Bhakti Yoga or Jnana Yoga or Raja Yoga, emphasize this purity of mind. And how do we get pure? How do we get purity of body? Depends on the food we eat. So how do we get purity of mind? It also depends on the food we give to the mind. And Swamiji deals with this at some length in Bhakti Yoga and Raja Yoga. But here, of course, he's bringing it in also in Karma Yoga, that nerves become like iron ropes. Like think of the big ships where they tie them down with ropes made of threads of wire, and it's actually an iron rope, which it doesn't have much flexibility. It becomes rigid, and it won't conduct electricity well. It's too thick. There'll be too much resistance in that iron rope. But there is again human nature. When we see that we often stop to inquire and wonder at it, and this wonderment is the first step to inquiry and light. Okay, there is human nature, which is an amazing thing, that we exist, that we are alive, that we are breathing, that we can think of God, that we can think of a flower, that I can close my eyes and imagine a rose and imagine what it smells like. This is amazing. When we see that, we often stop to inquire and wonder. This wonderment is the first step to inquiry and light. A wonderful, wonderful point. This came up in our class the other night on the Kena Upanishad. Who is it that causes us to, that causes the eye to? How is it that we can see? How is it that we can speak? How does that happen? Who is it that guides us to enables us to do such a wonderful thing as to speak? This inquiry, this sense of wonderment, of asking what lies behind. Is there something behind this universe? I used to, we don't usually share personal reflections. When I was in high school, and I was kind of atheistically minded. But we had a porch at the home where I grew up, high up on the house. It was a big 3-storied house, and on the top, kind of as part of the roof almost, was this porch, a screened-in porch. I would go up there and I would look out and I would see all the trees and birds, and it's just beautiful. In the summer, all the trees and all that, and I would think, how is it possible that there is nothing behind this beauty, this magic, this amazing manifestation of life, of all these different kinds of trees and birds, and how could there be nothing behind it? This wonderment. Well, what is it then? Then we have to ask, not only there must be something, but then we have to start asking, what is that? What is that something that's behind? There's a first step. And he gives this example. I am talking to you. I am not touching you, but these pulsations which I am making in the air enter through your ear, touch your nerves, and make a change in your minds. You cannot resist it. What can be more wonderful than this? We are separate beings, and I am making pulsations in the air, and my thought is being conveyed to you, and is setting up a similar state in your minds. It's wonderful. Swamiji is himself wondering at this, how amazing this is. And then he gives the example of the power of words. One man says to another, "You fool." And the other just stands up, clenches his fist, and lands a tremendous blow on the other man's nose. The word fool produces the change in that man. See the power of the word. See a woman weeping and miserable. Another woman comes along and says a few gentle words, and she stands up, and her doubled up frame becomes straightened at once. Her sorrow has gone, and she begins to smile. Think of the power of words. We see it so often. Day and night we manipulate this force. So we do not think, we do not inquire, but still there is infinite force in words. So this is another part of Karma Yoga. all this is like an introduction to the main theme of today's class of the 3rd of January, 1896. And we can see on the one hand, he's talking about the power of words, and then he took a little digression also to express the amazement, how wonderful this is, how amazing this is, and that this sense of wonderment, this sense of inquiry, this sense of curiosity, this sense of sensing that it's something amazing. There must be something behind, that we have to ask for that, we have to seek for that. That came in between, and then again demonstrating the power of words and how this is Karma Yoga. So this much, I think, is now I think he's coming to right. Okay. So now, so all this is like is almost like touching on different aspects of Karma Yoga, and now he's going to come to the subject of the class, which Krishan is waiting for eagerly. So today, so then he says after this is another part of Karma Yoga. Today I will only say a few words about that part of Karma Yoga which we have begun. Duty. That part which teaches us our duty to ourselves and to others. Okay, so he's come back to the topic of last week's class, the previous Friday's class of duty. Our duty to others means helping others, doing good to the world. Why should we do good to the world? Apparently, to help the world, but really to help ourselves. Okay, this is the topic of the class, that we help ourselves, not the world. Why should we do good to the world? True, it's a good question. Some people say, there's no need to do good to the world. We're here to make the best of things, eat, drink, and be merry. And I can run up a big debt because when I die, I'm gone. And so then that's not my problem anymore. I cease to exist. Why should I worry about that? Just eat, drink, and be merry. Have fun. Why should we do good to the world? Well, if we have a higher calling, then we gain a certain unselfishness. We start to develop compassion. Then we see suffering people. We want to help them. Apparently, to help the world is why we should do good to the world. But really, Swamiji says, to help ourselves. Very interesting. We should always try to help the world. That should be the highest motive power in us. But in the long run, when we analyze it properly, we will find that this world does not require our help. Interesting. On the one hand, this should be our motive power. The highest motive power should be to help the world. And this is the motto that Swami Vivekananda coined for the Ramakrishna order. Atmano mokshartham jagad hitaya cha. Twin ideals of one's own liberation, one's own spiritual illumination, and jagad hita. The hita, for the good of the world, not exactly help, but for the good, for the welfare of the world. May the world be blessed, may the world be lifted up, may the world be made better by us, for the good of the world. And yet, he says, if we analyze it properly, we'll find that this world doesn't need our help. It is God's world. He is in it and does not require your or my help at all. Sri Ramakrishna also would say that when he used to quote Shambhu, right? Shambhu Malik said, "Bless me that I may spend all my money in good to serve God and in doing good things." And Sri Ramakrishna would joked with him. Joked means kind of scolded him that, "Who are you to help the world? If God appears before you, what will you ask for? What will you ask of God? Will you say, 'Oh God, please build dispensaries and hospitals for me, and please pave the roads for the poor villagers'?" No, you will be overwhelmed in the presence of the divine, and you won't even think of that. You will ask for love. May I love you? May I know you? This world was not made that you or I should come and help it. It's funny, these stories. We have so many stories of Sri Ramakrishna stories of the dog with the curly tail, and probably he's going to tell this story a little later. Is it not? I forget if it's in this talk or another. Swamiji also tells the story of the man who wanted a ghost. He heard that if you can get a ghost, you can have under your control. You can, like the genie in the lamp, no? You rub the lamp and the genie comes out and grants you your 3 wishes. So if you can get a ghost or a spirit like that under your control, that spirit will do anything for you. So he goes to a great yogi who knows how to get the power of taming a ghost. And the yogi refuses to tell him, and no, it's very dangerous. But he goes on pestering, and so this yogi gets fed up. He says, all right, this is what you do. You chant this mantra and you'll get a ghost. But be very careful. The ghosts are very dangerous. If you don't give it work, it will kill you. So the man goes and he gets a ghost, and he says, so now I have a ghost. So the ghost says, yes, here I am, ready to serve you. Whatever you want, I'll do. But if you don't give me work, I'll eat you up. So he's great. Give me all the gold that I need. Here it is. What else? Well, build me a palace. Here it is. Ghost was so powerful. Then, build me a city. Here's your city. Then the man started to get worried. What else? Give me work, or I'll eat you up. So the man finally, he runs in terror to the yogi and says, sir, please help me, the ghost. And the ghost is on his heels. I'm coming to eat you up. So the yogi says, all right, take this. And there's a dog with a curly tail. He cuts the tail off the dog. Sorry, that's part of the story. And they do that still now. They cut dogs off of tails, snips and snails and puppy dog tails. And so he says, and it's curled up, and he says, give it to the ghost, tell him to straighten it out. So the man says, okay, straighten this tail out for me. So the ghost takes it, and he carefully straightens it out, and says, it's done. And he lets it go. And what happens? The tail curls up again. And then again, the ghost, he straightens it out. And with more intention, he straightens it out, and keeps curling up. And finally, the ghost realizes he's caught, because he cannot straighten the tail of a curly dog. It's crooked. And Sri Ramakrishna says, this world is that curly tail. You cannot straighten it out. It's a hard truth, because we think that we could make this world perfect. We think that if we could just elect the right people to run the country, we could straighten out all the crookedness in this world. And if we could just kill all the wicked people, we could just make it perfect. If it were perfect, it would not be the world, says Swami Vivekananda. So this idea of helping the world, yes, that is our highest motive, to bring good into the world, to help people, to raise up the people, let us say we need spiritual evolution. Yes, that's what the world needs now, is spiritual evolution. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda have come, to bring spiritual evolution, to bring spirituality to everyone. And yet, at the same time, Swamiji is telling us, we need to remember we cannot actually help the world. We help ourselves. And that's why he would say, be grateful when you're able to give some assistance to someone. Bow down at their feet. They should not be bowing down to you for the assistance you're giving them. You should be grateful to them that you're getting this opportunity to serve God and to expand your heart and to grow spiritually. So we have come to the end of our hour, and this is the last line. It is God's world. He is in it and does not require your or my help at all. This world was not made that you or I should come and help it. let's take just a moment of silence. We can reflect on tonight's class, and then we'll close with a chant. Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. From death, lead us to the deathless. Amritam, to the nectar. It's very difficult to help someone. Actually, this is a very freeing message. If we feel like we want to help someone, and then it's very difficult. But if we can do our best and then let it go, then it's a freeing. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to study Karma Yoga with you. It's a fascinating study, and your presence makes it a sacred study. Thank you.